Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive? Today, we're going to be tackling criminology. It's weird, right? Crime's everywhere, you hear about it all the time, but most of us, I think, don't really get what makes people actually commit crimes.
Yeah, it's definitely something people are curious about.
And that's exactly what we're going to try to unpack today. Think of it like a crash course, for anyone who's ever wondered about that whole why behind criminal behavior. So you've given me this fascinating document.
It's a good one.
It is. It's like a roadmap, kind of, to understanding the core concepts of criminology. What's cool is it's not just some boring textbook. It encourages you to, really think critically about all these concepts as you go through it.
It does do that, yeah.
So, ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right. Chapter 1. Unpacking Criminology, fitting title, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'd think defining criminology would be pretty straightforward, but this document throws a bit of a curveball. It points out that there's debate about whether criminology is even its own separate discipline.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
The whole interdisciplinary nature of criminology, it pulls from so many different fields: sociology, psychology, we've got law,
Yeah.
even biology sometimes.
Yeah. So it's not just about fitting into one neat little box.
Exactly.
It's more about understanding the big picture of crime,
Hmm.
the individual, the social context, and the legal framework, all that fun stuff.
It's all connected.
So how do we define criminology then if it's so all over the place?
Right.
Well, the document really stresses that there are multiple perspectives on this. It even says that the definition of crime itself, it's not fixed. It can change depending on the time and place.
It's fluid. Yeah.
And I find that so interesting. What's considered criminal in one place or time might be totally acceptable somewhere else.
It's true.
Think about abortion laws, right? They're all over the map depending on where you are in the world.
Huge differences.
Or an even more, I guess, extreme example.
Yeah.
Think about the Nazi era.
Right.
The things they did, horrifying, obviously, but within that regime, they were considered acceptable. But now they're universally condemned, obviously.
Of course.
Those examples really bring it home, right?
They do.
Context matters. Big time.
It's everything.
And to add another layer to this whole definition thing, the document contrasts two main definitions of crime: juridical and non-juridical.
Okay.
So juridical is all about the law, black and white, illegal or not.
Makes sense.
But then there's the non-juridical definition.
Right.
And this one considers social norms and harms even if something's not technically against the law.
I see.
To give a good example, that electrician overcharging for services.
Oh, right.
Legally, maybe not a crime, but ethically.
Definitely questionable.
It feels wrong,
Yeah.
So it makes you think about those gray areas where something might be legal, but still harmful or exploitative.
For sure.
So big takeaway from this first chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Crime is complex. There are different lenses to define and analyze it. And the document's preparing you to think critically about all this right from the start.
That's a good foundation.
Yeah. Now, on to Chapter 2. Okay. This one tackles how we measure crime, which brings us to the dark figure of crime, right?
Uh-huh.
Chapter 2 dives into the whole challenge of capturing the true extent of crime because, well, so much of it goes unreported. It's like an iceberg, right?
Yeah.
You only see the tip.
Exactly.
And this document starts by explaining why just relying on official police statistics can be really misleading.
Yeah, it's not always accurate.
Things like limited police resources in certain areas, political agendas, even something like technological changes can really skew those numbers.
Oh, definitely.
It's easy to see how that creates a distorted picture, right? If a community's got very few police officers, fewer crimes are going to be reported.
Of course.
And with politics, well, statistics can easily be, how do I say, manipulated.
Used to push an agenda.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if police data is not always reliable, what other options do we have?
Good question.
That's where victim surveys come in, going straight to the source, asking people directly about their experiences with crime.
Right. Trying to get a more complete picture.
Which can uncover those offenses that never made it into the official reports.
Exactly.
But are they perfect?
Probably not.
Well, no. The document points out they have limitations too. People might forget details or be hesitant to report certain types of crime,
Makes sense.
especially if they know the perpetrator.
Oh, yeah.
And some crimes, like domestic violence or white-collar crime, notoriously underreported in those surveys.
For sure.
So it's understandable why people might not report those.
Absolutely.
So, any other methods out there?
Well, the document talks about self-report studies.
Oh, okay. What's that?
This is where individuals are asked directly about their own involvement in criminal activity.
Wow. So, like, asking people to confess to crimes
Kind of, yeah.
seems risky.
Yeah.
But how reliable is that?
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
The document highlights the whole verifying the accuracy thing.
Right.
People might downplay their involvement. Or, the opposite, exaggerate to look tough.
I could see that.
And there's the issue of who participates, right?
Mm.
Like, if you survey mainly institutionalized youth who tend to be more delinquent, well, your results might be skewed.
It's like a puzzle with some missing pieces and some that don't even belong.
Yeah, a bit of a mess.
Sounds like measuring crime accurately is a real challenge.
It really is.
So the big takeaway from this chapter is that understanding the true extent of crime is an ongoing challenge. Criminologists use a mix of methods, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, to get the most accurate picture possible.
It's an ongoing process.
It is, and it reminds us that we should always be critical of statistics, right? Not just take them at face value.
Absolutely.
Ready to move on to the why behind the behavior.
Yeah, let's get into that.
All right, that's where Chapter 3 comes in. It digs into the factors associated with crime.
Okay.
And right off the bat, it emphasizes that there's no single cause, no easy answer.
Right.
Instead, it's a whole web of biological, social, and environmental influences.
It's complex.
So let's untangle that web a bit, shall we?
Let's do it.
It starts with biological factors, like temperament, something that might predispose individuals to certain behaviors.
Right.
The document acknowledges that, yeah, some biological traits can play a role, but it's not a simple cause and effect thing.
No, it's more nuanced than that.
And what about genetics? Does it go there?
It does, but cautiously.
Okay.
It says straight up, there's no such thing as a crime gene,
Okay, good to know.
but genes can influence certain traits. Impulsivity, low empathy, things like that. And those can, in turn, increase the risk of criminal behavior.
So it's more like you're predisposed, maybe like having a predisposition to a certain illness.
Yeah.
You're more susceptible, but it doesn't mean you'll definitely get sick.
Exactly. It's about vulnerability.
And they really stress that it's the interaction of those biological factors with the social and environmental stuff that really shapes a person's path.
The whole picture.
Okay, so let's talk about the social factors then. The document goes deep into family structure and dynamics, arguing that early childhood experiences, especially within the family, can have a lasting effect.
Yeah, those early years are crucial.
We hear a lot about broken homes and how they affect kids.
Right.
Does the document support that?
It's a bit more complex than that.
Okay.
It acknowledges the debate, but doesn't present it as, simple cause and effect.
Right, more nuance.
It does highlight this one South African study, though.
Okay.
Found a correlation between parental absence and a higher chance of criminal behavior later in life.
So, while it's not a guarantee, parental presence seems important.
It seems to be a factor, yeah.
What other family dynamics are in there?
Well, they talk about parenting styles, family conflicts, and even the impact of parents who are criminals themselves.
Makes sense.
They emphasize that a supportive, nurturing family can be like a protective shield,
Of course.
promoting positive development and reducing the risk of delinquency.
So family matters, but in complex ways, not just those simple labels.
Exactly.
And it's not your family. The document dives into community factors too.
Yeah.
Poverty, social disorganization, exposure to violence. All these create environments where crime's more likely to thrive. They even cite this study, a South African one.
Okay.
A quarter of the children surveyed were at risk of antisocial behavior.
Yeah.
And why? Factors like poor parenting and materialism.
A quarter? Wow, that's...
Yeah. It's shocking. Really highlights how important it is to address those issues, right?
Absolutely.
Create healthier environments for kids.
Definitely.
It really paints a clear picture of how intertwined those social factors in criminal behavior are.
Yeah.
They also touch on the school environment.
Oh, interesting.
It's weird to think of schools as potential breeding grounds for crime, right?
They should be safe spaces.
Exactly.
What kinds of things do they talk about?
Well, things like bullying, obviously.
Right.
Negative peer influences, lack of support from teachers, academic difficulties.
Oh, yeah, I can see how that could contribute.
It's like schools can either make existing vulnerabilities worse or provide a buffer. It's all about creating a supportive and engaging environment, making kids feel connected.
That sense of belonging is so important.
And that leads us to the big takeaway from this chapter. Crime is a multifaceted social issue. There's no quick fix. Addressing it requires a holistic approach that considers all these different influences.
Makes sense.
So, we've defined crime, looked at how it's measured, what factors contribute, Where do we go from here?
Into the mind of a criminal.
Exactly.
Ooh, getting excited.
Chapter 4. Understanding the psychological and social dimensions of criminal behavior. It really encourages you to think about why people do what they do. Like, what's going on in their heads when they decide to commit a crime?
The motivations.
Yes, we're about to enter the world of criminal psychology, kind of.
Love it.
They start by talking about the importance of understanding motivation.
Okay.
They argue that every action, criminal or not, comes from a desire to meet a need or achieve a goal.
So it's about figuring out the why behind the action.
Exactly.
That's a big one.
And, there are tons of different theories about motivation.
Oh, I bet.
Some focus on internal drives, others on external rewards and punishments.
Makes sense.
The document doesn't go deep into each theory, but stresses that recognizing that everyone has different needs, different motivations.
Right.
That's key to understanding their actions.
So putting yourself in their shoes, even if their actions are awful.
Exactly. Trying to see the world through their eyes.
That's tough, but important, I guess.
And then it goes into the role of cognition,
Okay.
specifically social cognition.
What's that?
Basically, it's how individuals make sense of their social world, how they interact with others,
Okay.
and how that plays a role in criminal choices.
Interesting.
It's about how we process information and make decisions in social situations, which seems pretty relevant to crime.
Definitely.
The document introduces key components: moral reasoning, empathy, and self-control, and how they can influence our choices.
Makes sense.
Like, for example, someone with low empathy might find it easier to commit a crime because they can't really grasp the victim's pain.
It's like they don't connect with the suffering.
Exactly. And then self-control, huge factor. If you struggle with impulse control, you might just act without thinking about consequences.
We've all been there, maybe not with crime, but,
So this chapter is all about understanding the inner workings of the mind and how that, combined with social and environmental factors, shapes behavior.
it's like a recipe for crime, but with really complex ingredients.
It's a good way to put it. It lays the groundwork for understanding those psychological and social dimensions.
Definitely a lot to unpack there.
There is. So are you ready to shift gears a bit?
Sure. What's next?
We're going to focus on South Africa specifically,
Okay, sounds good.
because Chapter 5 is all about examining the factors and perspectives related to crime in South Africa specifically.
Yeah.
The document acknowledges that it's a country with a really unique, complex history, and all that has created a particular set of challenges when it comes to crime. It makes sense.
South Africa has such a layered past, and it feels like it would definitely impact the crime landscape there.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's exactly what we're going to unpack in the next part of our deep dive.
Can't wait.
We'll explore general factors that contribute to crime in South Africa, things like inadequate welfare services and the lasting effects of apartheid, and then get into more specific factors like the rise of vigilantism and problems within the criminal justice system itself.
Sounds fascinating. I'm ready when you are.
Perfect. Welcome back, everyone. Glad you're with us for part 2 of our deep dive into criminology.
Good to be back.
We've laid some groundwork, right? Defining crime, how it's measured, the factors that might contribute to it. Now, we're going to dive into the theories, the ones that try to explain criminal behavior.
Right, getting into the why.
Yeah, it's like trying to understand the software running in a criminal's mind,
Oh, I like that analogy.
And just like there's no one-size-fits-all software, there's no single theory that can perfectly explain why people commit crimes. Definitely not. But the theories give us some frameworks to work with.
Right, different ways of looking at it. So I'm ready to explore those. Where do we start?
Well, the document kicks off with a classic, the rational choice theory.
Oh, okay, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's been around for a while, but still super influential in criminology.
Why is that?
Well, the core idea is pretty simple. Criminals are rational actors. They weigh the costs and benefits of their actions, just like anyone making a decision.
So, they're doing a cost-benefit analysis before committing a crime.
Exactly. They think about, how much they could gain, the chances of getting caught, how severe the punishment might be.
Makes sense on the surface, but people aren't always rational, right?
That's true.
Especially when emotions come into play. Anger, desperation.
Oh, for sure. And the document acknowledges that. The rational choice theory has its limits.
Like what?
Well, it doesn't fully account for those emotions you mentioned, or social pressures, individual differences, like how impulsive someone is, their risk tolerance.
Right. So it's a starting point, maybe. A simplified model.
Exactly. Helps us understand one aspect of criminal decision-making, but not the whole story.
Okay, so what's a theory that gives us a broader view then?
Well, the social disorganization theory shifts the focus from the individual to the environment.
Okay, interesting.
It says crime is more likely in communities that have certain characteristics: poverty, high turnover of residents, lack of social cohesion.
So it's not about the people themselves, but the places they live.
That's the idea. These disorganized communities often lack the things that usually discourage crime, strong social bonds, shared values, informal surveillance, like neighbors looking out for each other.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you live in a place where crime's already common and there's no strong community, well, you might be more likely to get involved yourself.
That's what the theory argues. And there's this fascinating research by Shaw and McKay. They actually mapped crime patterns in Chicago.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and they found certain neighborhoods consistently had higher crime rates no matter who lived there. So it was the place, not the people, driving the crime.
Wow, that's a powerful finding.
Right.
So if we want to reduce crime, we got to focus on improving those places, right? Building up those communities.
Exactly. Create opportunities, strengthen social ties.
Makes sense. Okay, what other theories explore that link between social factors and crime?
Well, there's the strain theory, developed by Robert Merton.
Okay, I've heard of him.
Yeah, his idea is that crime often comes from the strain, the pressure that people feel when they can't reach those socially accepted goals through legitimate means.
So it's about that gap between aspirations and opportunities, like wanting a good life, but feeling like you don't have a fair shot at getting it.
Exactly. And in a lot of societies, there's this huge emphasis on success, right? Often defined by wealth, social status.
Yeah, definitely. But not everyone has equal access to those resources and opportunities.
And that's what creates that strain, especially for those who are already marginalized, disadvantaged.
Right, leading to frustration, resentment.
Hmm.
What happens when people feel like the system is rigged?
Well, Merton said people adapt to that strain in different ways.
Okay, how so?
Some might conform, keep trying to achieve those goals the right way, even if it's super hard. Others might just give up on those goals, become withdrawn.
But what about those who choose a path that leads to crime?
That's what Merton called innovation. They accept those societal goals, they want that success, but they reject the traditional ways of getting it.
So they're like entrepreneurs, almost. But instead of starting a business, they're finding alternative ways to achieve financial success, even if it means breaking the law.
That's a great way to think about it. And Merton argued this innovation is more likely among those who feel the most strain, the most blocked from those goals.
It's like they're playing the game, but with a different set of rules. Rules they had to create out of necessity.
Exactly. And the strain theory really highlights the importance of addressing those inequalities, right? Giving people real opportunities, a fairer chance, if we want to reduce crime.
This is giving me a whole new perspective. Okay, what other theories are there?
Well, the document goes on to the social learning theory, which focuses on, well, learning.
Okay, so how does that apply to crime?
The idea is that we learn criminal behavior just like any other behavior through our interactions, especially those close to us.
So family, friends, even the media can influence whether we commit crimes.
Exactly. The document talks about Edwin Sutherland, who came up with the idea of differential association.
Differential association. Sounds complicated.
It's not that bad. Basically, it means our exposure to different influences shapes our behavior. If we're around people with pro-criminal attitudes, values, well, we're more likely to adopt those ourselves.
It's about the balance of influences in our lives, right?
Yeah.
The pro-criminal versus the anti-criminal.
Yeah, like a tug of war, almost. If the pro-criminal side pulls harder.
We're more likely to end up on that side.
And this learning can happen anywhere. Family, peer groups, work.
So we're constantly absorbing these messages, picking up on cues. Makes sense. We're social creatures.
We are. Okay, now for a bit of a shift. The social control theory. This one asks a different question.
Oh, how so?
Instead of asking why people commit crimes, it asks why they don't.
Interesting. So it's about what prevents crime, not what causes it.
Exactly. Travis Hershey, the guy who developed it, his idea was that people are naturally self-interested, capable of committing crimes, but they're held back by their social bonds.
Social bonds, what are those exactly?
He identified 4 main types: attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief.
Okay, break those down for me.
Sure. Attachment is about the emotional bonds we have, especially with those close to us. The stronger those bonds...
The less likely we are to disappoint them, hurt them by doing something wrong.
Right. Then there's commitment. That's about our investment in conventional activities like school, work, or reputation. The more we have to
The
lose.
less likely we are to risk it all in crime.
Exactly. Weighing those potential costs, right? Then involvement, that's the time and energy we put into those activities. More involved.
Less time to get in trouble.
You got it. And finally, belief. This is about accepting those conventional norms and values, if we believe in the rules.
We're less likely to break them.
Kershey said these four bonds work together to kind of keep most people on the right path.
Like a safety net, almost. So this theory emphasizes strengthening those bonds, right? Strong families, community involvement, positive values.
Exactly, building those support systems.
This is fascinating. What's next?
Okay, ready for the general theory of crime. This one was developed by Gottfredson and Hershey. Yeah, the same Hershey.
He was busy.
He was. This theory builds on his earlier work, but focuses on low self-control.
Low self-control. What does that mean exactly?
They define it as the tendency to avoid acts whose long-term costs exceed their immediate benefits.
So being able to think ahead, consider the consequences.
Exactly. People with low self-control, they're often impulsive, risk takers, focused on immediate gratification, trouble resisting temptation even if it means bad stuff later.
It's like that classic cookie example, right? You see a cookie, you want it. Someone with high self-control might wait.
I'll have it after dinner.
But someone with low self-control
Grabs it right away, even if they know they'll get in trouble.
Yeah, we all know someone like that. So this theory says low self-control is mostly shaped by parenting, right?
Yeah, they emphasize that a lot. Parents who don't monitor their kids, don't recognize or punish bad behavior, well, they're more likely to raise kids with low self-control.
So it's about setting boundaries, teaching them about consequences, helping them learn to delay gratification.
And the document says low self-control, while influenced by parenting, it tends to be a pretty stable trait. Shows up early and sticks around.
So it's not just bad decisions in the moment, it's a deeper pattern.
Right. And according to this theory, it explains all sorts of crime and deviance. Theft, violence, even things like drug abuse or reckless driving.
That's a pretty bold claim. But yeah, I can see how it might apply in a lot of cases.
It's definitely sparked a lot of debate and research. And it highlights how important those early experiences, those parenting practices are in shaping who we become.
Okay, so we've got theories that focus on individual choices, social disorganization, strain, learning, self-control. What other perspectives are out there?
Well, the document brings up the impact of labeling. This is the labeling theory. And it shifts the focus from the individual to society's reaction to crime.
Interesting. So less about why people commit crimes, more about how society responds to them.
Exactly. The idea is that labeling someone a criminal can actually push them towards more crime.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Right. Once they're labeled, they might start seeing themselves as a criminal, even if they didn't before.
And that can lead to all sorts of problems, right?
Truly. Stigmatization, fewer opportunities, people treat them differently, even for a minor offense.
It's like society's pushing them further down that criminal path, constantly reminding them of their past.
The document emphasizes how important this is for juvenile justice, especially. Labeling young people as delinquents can have really long-lasting consequences. Makes it harder to reintegrate, turn their lives around.
Yeah, it seems like a more compassionate approach is needed. Focus on rehabilitation, not just punishment.
For sure. The document also touches on a few other perspectives. It mentions feminist criminology, which challenges those traditional theories for being too focused on men.
So bringing a gendered perspective to the table, recognizing that women's experiences with crime are often different.
Exactly. Feminist criminology looks at how gender roles, inequality, experiences of violence, all of that shapes women's paths into and out of crime.
Makes sense. It's not just a one-size-fits-all situation. What about critical criminology?
Critical criminology takes a broader view, looking at power and inequality, especially within the criminal justice system.
So it's about those bigger structures, the power dynamics, who gets labeled, who gets punished.
Right. It challenges the idea that crime is simply breaking the law. It sees it as a product of social injustice, inequality.
A more radical perspective. Okay, what's peacemaking criminology all about?
Peacemaking criminology advocates for a more humanistic approach, I guess, focused on restorative justice.
Restorative justice. So healing, reconciliation, not just punishment.
That's it. Addressing the root causes, promoting dialogue between victims and offenders, building a more peaceful, just society.
Wow, that's a powerful perspective, especially in a world that often seems so focused on violence and retribution.
It is. It's a call for compassion, recognizing the shared humanity of everyone involved.
This has been an amazing journey through all these different theories. I feel like I have a much better understanding of how we can explain crime, all the different angles.
Me too. It's fascinating stuff.
And now I'm really eager to see how these theories play out in South Africa specifically.
That's where we're headed next. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore those unique challenges and perspectives in the South African context.
I can't wait. All right, welcome back, everyone, for the final part of our criminology deep dive. We've covered a lot, huh?
We have. It's been a great overview.
From, what crime even is, how it's measured, to all these different theories trying to explain it.
A lot of theories.
Now, we're going to zoom in on South Africa. Our listener is particularly interested in the factors that contribute to crime there.
Yeah, it's a unique context for sure.
It is. And the document, it actually dedicates a whole chapter to this. And right from the start, it emphasizes the impact of apartheid.
Right, it's impossible to ignore that.
Yeah, it's like a shadow that's still there.
Definitely.
Just to clarify, for anyone who might not know, apartheid was this system of racial segregation and discrimination that lasted for decades in South Africa.
Yeah.
How did that history shape the crime landscape we see today?
Well, as the document explains, it created these deep inequalities, social and economic, that haven't gone away. And these inequalities, they often fall along racial lines, and they're a major driver of crime.
So we're talking poverty, lack of opportunities, marginalization.
Especially among Black South Africans, yeah.
It's like when people are denied those basic resources, that sense of fairness.
Yeah, it breeds frustration, resentment, even desperation sometimes.
And those feelings, they can lead to crime.
Exactly. It's almost like crime becomes a way to survive or get what you feel you've been denied.
It's a way to make things right in their minds, maybe?
It could be, yeah. And the document also points out that because of this, there's a real lack of trust between communities and the authorities, which makes tackling crime even harder.
It's a vicious cycle then, isn't it?
It is.
Inequality fuels crime. Crime erodes trust even more.
And it just keeps going.
And talking about those cycles, the document addresses violence in South Africa.
A big problem.
Always has been, really, during and after apartheid.
Unfortunately.
Why is that? Why is violence so prevalent?
Well, it points to a few things, like the normalization of violence during apartheid itself. For years, violence was the tool of control, oppression, so it became ingrained.
It's almost like if violence is all you've ever known,
it becomes normal.
Yeah. Tragic, but it makes a twisted kind of sense.
And on top of that, there's the whole issue of firearms.
Oh, right. South Africa has a lot of guns, right?
Yeah, easy access to them. And that definitely contributes to the high levels of violence. Conflicts escalate quickly when there are guns involved.
Makes it that much easier to turn deadly.
Unfortunately.
What about the psychological impact of apartheid, though? It feels like that would have a lasting effect, too.
Oh, absolutely. The document talks about the trauma, the psychological scars that many people still carry, not just those who were directly victimized, but those who witnessed it too.
Generational trauma.
Yeah.
It's heavy stuff.
Trauma has this way of sticking with you, making you more vulnerable to violence, both as a victim and a perpetrator.
So those historical injustices, their effects ripple outwards.
It's not just events, it's the wounds they leave behind.
And it makes it so much harder to heal as a community, right?
Definitely.
The document also mentions substance abuse.
Oh, right. Alcohol, drugs. Big problem.
Linked to crime and violence, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it fuels a lot of it. South Africa's got this long history of alcohol abuse.
Okay.
And it's often connected to those other issues. Poverty, unemployment, all that stress. People use substances to cope, which is understandable, but it often leads to addiction and more problems.
Right. Coping mechanism turns into
another problem.
Yeah.
Substance abuse, it impairs judgment, obviously, increases aggression, makes people more likely to take risks, and it also makes them vulnerable to becoming victims themselves.
It's a mess all around.
It is.
So we've got all these factors: inequality, violence, trauma, substance abuse. It sounds pretty overwhelming.
It is complex.
And then on top of all that, we've got the problems within the criminal justice system itself.
Right. We talked about that briefly before.
But I want to dig into it a bit more.
Sure.
What challenges does the document highlight?
Well, things like corruption, inefficiency, lack of resources, all that stuff undermines public trust.
Of course, if you don't trust the system.
It can't function properly.
Right. So even if crimes are reported, investigated,
there's no guarantee justice will be served.
And that's the perception many South Africans have, unfortunately.
It is.
And when that happens, what do people do?
They take things into their own hands. Vigilantism.
Which is dangerous.
It is.
It undermines the whole idea of a fair and impartial system.
Yeah, and often just leads to more violence. The document really emphasizes the need for reform within that system, like a big overhaul.
To rebuild that trust.
Exactly. Make sure it's actually serving the people, holding people accountable.
Sounds like a massive undertaking, but absolutely necessary.
For sure.
The document also goes into those socioeconomic factors we touched on before.
Like the foundation of it all?
We talked about poverty, inequality. What other socioeconomic factors are at play?
Well, unemployment's a huge one.
Right, especially among young people.
If you can't find a job.
You get desperate.
Exactly. And the document also talks about the lack of education, skills training.
So even if there are jobs,
People might not be qualified.
right, so their options are even more limited.
It's about investing in people, giving them a real shot.
Giving them the tools to create a better life.
And that's the key takeaway. Addressing these socioeconomic issues is crucial for reducing crime in the long run. It's about breaking those cycles of poverty, creating real opportunities.
It's about hope, in a way.
It is.
Because when people have hope, they're less likely to.
Resort to crime.
Exactly. It's a reminder that crime is often a symptom of these bigger social problems.
Yeah, you got to treat the root cause.
Okay, now, for something I found really interesting, the document also talks about cultural factors shaping crime patterns in South Africa.
Oh, yeah, that was fascinating. What did they say?
Well, one thing they bring up is this emphasis on respect for authority. It's a traditional value, generally a good thing, right?
Yeah, respecting those in charge.
But it can also create this reluctance to report crimes or challenge authority figures even when they're doing something wrong.
I see. So it becomes a barrier.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of patriarchal attitudes.
Oh, yeah.
Contributing to violence against women.
A huge problem, unfortunately.
It's a global issue, really.
It is.
But the document stresses how important it is to challenge those norms, promote gender equality.
If we want to create a safer society for everyone.
Exactly. It's about changing mindsets, shifting those deep-seated beliefs.
Yeah.
So we come to the end of the document, and it acknowledges that crime in South Africa.
It's complicated.
It's messy, it's multi-layered, there's no easy fix.
Definitely not.
No magic wand to wave.
No.
It's going to take a lot of work.
It will.
A multifaceted approach.
Addressing those root causes and the symptoms, too.
Tackling poverty and inequality, promoting social justice, investing in education and job creation.
Strengthening the justice system, challenging those harmful norms.
Fostering a culture of peace and respect.
It's a lot.
It is. But this deep dive has been incredible, hasn't it?
It really has.
We've learned so much about crime, how to understand it, and the specific issues South Africa faces.
A great foundation for anyone wanting to learn more.
Exactly. And for our listener, I hope they feel more informed, more equipped to think about this issue.
And maybe even inspired to be a part of the solution.
Because at the end of the day, understanding crime isn't just about knowledge.
It's about action.
It's about making a difference. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. And until next time, keep those curious minds working.